Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today. As you can tell, something's a little different. I've been wanting to change my hair for quite a while, and with my previous hairstyle, it's really hard to do because the shaved sides and the long top made it where I couldn't just grow it out. It would look really weird for a very long time, so I'm fresh shaved so I can do something different with it once it regrows. So nothing weird is going on, I just wanted to do my hair differently, and this is the best way to go about doing it. Plus, it's so soft. I'm all fluffy. I feel like a peach. Anyways, back to the video. Basically, I'm going to be making an owlbear statue. I've been wanting to do an owlbear, and I've been wanting to do kind of like a foo dog type creature that was made like stone. It had growing things on it and stuff, and I thought I'd just mesh the two ideas together and see what I got. Anyways, let's get started. Okay, so for my owlbear, I need to make a bunch of different clay pieces. We have the face, we have all the claws, and then I want to add a bunch of decorative pieces to it. So I'm going to start with the face first, that way we can figure out the style and feel for the creature, and then we can move on to the other pieces. So I'm keeping it very flat, just like a normal owl, and I'm just going to get this covered with clay, blend it out, and then I want to find the middle of the face and kind of mark everything out so I can make it very symmetrical. Now at first with this piece I thought I was going to use resin pieces to make the eyes, but I realized that they were just a little bit too small for what I wanted to do with the piece, so I'm going to use clay instead and sculpt the eyes. Now I don't make my eyes out of clay too often. Normally it's when they're just really tiny and I just don't have the right size bead to use as an eye. But for this it's kind of the opposite, they're just way too big. After I get those placed, all I need to do is start building up clay to kind of shape the face a little bit, and then we can start making the eyelids going around the eyes. For this, I just take strips of clay and lay them under and over the eyes. Once I have the bottom eyelids in place, I'm then going to start blending everything together and kind of cleaning up the edges going around the eyes. Once I have that kind of roughly cleaned up, I can start adding the eyelids over the eyes and doing the same thing. I'm then going to work on getting a basic shape laid out for the beak, just kind of blending the clay and adjusting it to where it's a bit more pointed. And then what we're going to do, normally I use fur to make feathers and stuff for this situation, but our owlbear is a statue, so I'm actually going to sculpt the feathers for the face. So to do this, I'm going to take some little bits of clay, rolling out a bunch of balls, tapering them off a little bit, and then squishing them in place. To add more detail to the feathers, I'll use one of my tools and add some line work to it. Other than that, we're just going to be making layers and layers and layers of clay feathers. So this is kind of time consuming. I started with the middle of the face and then I just kind of worked my way out. One thing that I decided that I wanted to add for extra detail were these little clay pieces I made kind of a while ago because I had an idea for something and I just never used them. But they're kind of the little like cloud squishies that you see on foo dogs, and I thought they'd look really cool with this piece. So I'm just going to add a couple here and there, and then I have more to add to the body later. Other than that, it's just adding more and more clay feathers and then kind of cleaning up the edges on the last layer of clay feathers so they blend in around the eyes. So I'm just going to use a tool to kind of rough up the clay a little bit and add some texture. And then I think we're pretty good with the clay head. I'm going to put this in the oven for about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit, and then we can start working on the other clay, which most of this clay will be the epoxy clay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a few clay feathers that we can add to the piece for decoration. So I'm just going to lay out some kind of ovals of clay, kind of squish them down, and then I'm going to use my tool to make some line art on them to make it look more feathery. I'm also going to use a dotting tool to make a hole at the base of it, so we have some way of adding a wire or something to it to hold it while we paint and do whatever we need to it. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to work on clay-wise are the claws. Now these need to be on a wire frame because I want to make the toes poseable. So I took the fabric piece that I will eventually show you how I made to figure out the shape that I need for the wire frame. So I laid this out and measured the wires that I needed, and I wrapped everything together into a wire frame that would have 4 toes. And then for each toe, I just kind of bent the wire to have a curve at the end, and I'm going to add clay and kind of pinch and sculpt that into a point. I'm going to do that to all of the claws for all 4 of the feet, and we're going to let everything cure. Once all of our clay has finished baking and curing, we can start painting everything. So what I'm going to do to all of the clay pieces first is kind of get that stone color down. And this is actually surprisingly easy. You mainly just need your black paint and to kind of water it down. If you don't want it to be super dark, you can add a tiny bit of white to kind of get more of a gray color. But I'm going to water that down, and then we're going to paint over our entire clay piece and then wipe away the excess paint with a damp paper towel. You mainly just want the paint to sit in the cracks that you have sculpted in the clay, and then to lightly stain the surface of the clay. This will give it a really cool stone texture, and you may adjust it here and there. I'll probably add highlights a bit, but usually you can get the stone texture down with just this, maybe doing it once or twice after the paint has dried in between. So I'm going to do this to all of my clay pieces, get them dried, and then I can start working on more details. Most of these clay pieces I'm not going to really adjust anymore, but I do have a decent amount of work to do on the face. After that, I want to add some gold detailing. So those little swirly bits that we added to the face, I want to paint those all kind of like a more of a dingier gold, almost copper, so it looks like it's patinaed. I'm also going to add this to the tips of the feathers because I thought it would be a nice addition to them. After that, I want to add just a tiny bit of highlights to the feathers, just a bit on the very front of the face. And then for the eyes, we're going to be doing kind of a glow-in-the-dark effect, but first I need to paint them before we add the glow-in-the-dark bit. So I'm going to try and paint them a very pale blue, because that's going to be the color that they're going to glow. So I'm going to get those painted. I'll probably add some shadowing and adjust that a bit after I get the basic color down, and then we'll work on adding a mica powder to this to get it to glow. Now, if you wanted to, you could use resin for this, but I wanted to do something that would cure a little faster. So I'm going to be using a diamond glaze type glue, and I'm going to paint over the surface of the eye, and then I'm going to sprinkle my mica powder over this. I'll knock off any excess powder, and then I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to do a couple layers of this, and in between the layers I'm checking in the dark to see if they're glowing the way that I want. This is also a good way to check if you missed a spot so that you can fix it in between the layers. So I'm going to get that to where I like how they glow, and then I can completely resin over the rest of the face to protect the paint job. I'll do this to the other clay pieces as well. Okay, so our clay pieces are done, and now we can start working on the fabric. So here is the pattern that I'm going to use. It's a pretty basic just body style for the piece, where we can have a nice mane and kind of thicker front legs. And then I thought it would also be cool to give him a cute little tail. So before we start sewing everything, I need to actually dye our fabric, which is going to be used for the stone section of his body. I have a white suede that I'm going to be using for that, so I'm going to get all the fabric pieces cut out for those, and then I'm going to be using my paints to stain it and make it look a little bit more rough in texture. So I'm going to just lightly get this wet, and then I'm going to start adding colors to it until I like how that looks. We'll have to obviously let this dry, and then we can start sewing the pieces together. Now the fabric that I'm going to use for the more bushier, overgrown sections of him is this really cool green curly fur fabric that I found. I think it'll work perfect to make him look like an actual bush. Okay, so let's start on sewing the sides of the body. So the front half of him, the more mane and chunkier side, is going to be the bushy fabric, and then the back end will be our stone fabric. So we need to sew these two pieces together first. Then we'll take each side and we can sew down the bottom section, more of the belly section, to combine the two pieces of fabric together. For his tail, the underside is going to be our stone fabric, and then the top is going to be our bush fabric. So I'm just going to take both pieces, pin them together, and sew around them. I'm going to leave the base open so we can flip it right side out, and we'll use that to connect it to the body when we're closer to getting to that point. For the arms, the lower section is just going to be the bushy fabric, so I have my inside and outside piece, and I'm just going to sew down the fronts of each one for each arm. And then for more of the shoulder section, I've got a stone section that we're going to sew in place on one side. And then for the back legs, the more upper thigh area is going to be stone. I've got an inside and outside piece for each of these. Just like the front legs, we're going to sew down the fronts of these. And then the lower section is going to be the green bush fabric. So I've got a left and right for these as well, sewing down the front. And then I just need to take the upper part of the leg and the lower part and sew those pieces together for each leg. And then for the poseable toes, I have the pattern sketched out. I'm going to fold a piece of fabric over another piece, and I'm going to draw out the shape for 4 of those feet. I'm then going to follow all of those lines with my sewing machine, making sure to leave the tips of the toes open and the base of the foot open. Once I'm done sewing that, I can cut these pieces of fabric out and then flip them right side out. I'm then going to take that poseable frame that we have our claws on, and I can run this over that wire frame. You're just going to take each toe and make sure to run it through where the claw sticks out. Then we're just going to take our glue and glue the fabric around the base of each claw. Now you'll notice I haven't painted the claws yet. I wanted to wait until they were on the actual foot. So what we're going to do now is basically what we did with the other clay pieces, just kind of water down our black paint and then wipe away whatever we don't want still on the claw. What I mainly want is to have the black kind of build up around the base of the claw where the fabric combines. Okay, so we have everything ready to add to the wireframe. I've made a very simple one where we just have wires for each part of the body, and I've only reinforced it a little bit around the neck and the arms, just because the head is so heavy. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start adding things to this wireframe. First thing that we're going to add to our wireframe is going to be the fabric for the body. I've already cut little holes in place for where the wires for the front legs and the back legs are going to run through, and I just need to take those wires and slide the fabric over the wireframe. Once we have that in place, I'm going to take our clay head and I'm going to glue it to the end of the wire for the neck. We're going to let that dry a little bit, and then I'm going to take the fabric for the neck and I'm going to glue it around the base of the head. When we get to the top of the head, I have this little bit of triangle fabric to kind of fill the gap in between the fabric, mainly because it just didn't reach around, and this will kind of shape the body a little bit better than extending that one piece of fabric weirdly. After our fabric is glued in place around the base of our head, we're going to start stuffing and closing up our body. So I'm going to sew down the back of the creature, and as I go, I'm just going to add more and more stuffing until I get to the very end. When I get to the very end, I'm going to leave a little bit of a hole because we need to add our tail. So I'm going to slide our tail over the wire for the tail, and then I'm going to stitch it in place at the base of the body. Next, I'm going to start adding the legs. I'm going to start with the back legs first, and I'm going to take the fabric for them and start stitching them in place around where the wire is sticking out of the body. I'm going to do a back and forth thing so I can make both of them extremely even because I don't want to have them like offset. I'm a little bit picky about that stuff. I try to have them as even as possible. So I'm going to get that fabric sewn into place, and then I'm going to adjust the wires. That way we can add the wire frame for our feet. And I'm just going to take those and then I'm going to wrap them together with a thinner gauge wire. Once I have the feet in place on the wire frame, I'm then going to take the fabric for the leg and I'm going to start stitching it in place around the fabric for the foot. So we're just going to add those two pieces together. Once that's in place, we can start stuffing and closing up the entire leg. Then I just need to do the exact same thing with the front legs. I'm going to add that fabric, adjust my wires, add our feet to the wire frame, start sewing everything together, stuffing and closing it up. Now at this point his body is all put together and you could kind of call him done at this point, but I want to add a lot more detail to him. And one thing that I want to do is make that mane look more organic and kind of lumpier like an actual bush. So I'm going to take random chunks of the fabric that we used for it and I'm going to sew them in place and stuff them to kind of add lumps here and there. So I'm going to just kind of do this randomly throughout the entire mane. After that, I have all of our extra stone details that I wanted to add. Those little foo dog swirls I'm going to add to the back of his mane, and then I have those stone feathers that I want to add a little bit framing his face, but mainly on his arms. So I'm going to be gluing those in place and then taking little bits of our green fur fabric to cover up the seam and kind of blend everything together a little bit more. Once I have all of that in place, we just need to adjust our fluffiness a bit. It needs some highlights and it needs to kind of be brushed a bit so it blends better together. So I'm going to take a brighter green and I'm going to adjust the fur a bit by painting it just a tad, just lightly going over and messing it up a little bit to make it look just bushier and brighter. And then for my last little detail, I wanted to just kind of adjust the difference between our stone and our bush. Basically, I want to blend it a bit or make it look like it fades more naturally by painting the green onto the stone fabric. So I'm just going to take a darker green and kind of go over it, adding a few dots here and there just to kind of make it look like the greenery is creeping onto the stone. Okay guys, and here is our foo dog inspired stone owlbear. I had so much fun with this project. Kind of hard to catch on camera because I don't have like one of those really expensive cameras, but his eyes are glow in the dark and they come out of this really pretty blue. I think I had a little bit of footage that I showed you, but yeah. I'm so happy with how this turned out. It actually looks like very like mossy and stuff. I kind of combed it so it's a little bit more fluffed up and stuff than it originally was. And then of course we got all the poseable toes. Every single one of them is poseable, so you can probably grab onto things. But yeah, I'm going to have him up for sale on my website, so if anyone wants to buy him, give him a new home, he will be there. Just check the links down in the description. While you're down there, you'll see a bunch of art supply links and stuff like that. Kind of a rough idea of what I normally do. I don't think I'll have this fabric linked, but I have most of my stuff linked down there. So if you're interested in trying something out that I use in a video, you can check that out. These are affiliated links, so if you do buy anything through them, it helps support the channel. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!